you for being here. We're all masked. We've all have vaccines, so hopefully we feel safe in this space. Lots of air movement around here. If at any point in class you feel like you want to get up and get some air or use the restroom or get a drink of water or pop outside, you are welcome to do that. Oh, did we close the door? Okay, thank you. So some of you have kind of already heard this introduction before, but I feel like it's helpful for me to say it every time I teach. And I think it's helpful for all of us to hold it in mind when we're in here practicing together. So I'll just keep repeating it at the beginning of each class. But when Kim and I decided to teach this class on Wednesday nights, one thing that we felt was really important for our mental health was to be able to share the space. So we are alternating teaching on Wednesdays. So one Wednesday I'll teach and the next Wednesday I get to come practice and Kim gets to do the same. And so next week Kim will be teaching and I'll be practicing with her, and I would love for you all to be here. We can practice together as students, and that is in part to give us the mental space to do this and time for our own self-care, and also time to just build community with everyone else. So I hope that we can kind of keep practicing and learning together in this space in that way. Part of our intention for having a weekly practice again was recognizing how disconnected we had become from our bodies over the course of the pandemic, over however many months it's been now, 19 months, 20 months, something like that. And sort of a realization that that disconnection, you know, it was really an effective coping strategy for much of the pandemic to deal with the change and the grief and the pain of being separate from loved ones and all of everything that's happened in the last couple of years. And also recognition that it's not a very good place to stay long term for an individual and collectively as well. So we were thinking about how, you know, as a community, as a collective, how disconnected we are from our bodies and from each other, and how these systems of oppression that are at last being exposed more publicly, white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy and racism, all of these things really depend on us being disconnected from our bodies. They depend on our disembodiment, and they depend on us being disconnected from each other. So when we come together in practice spaces like this, it is about self-care, of course. It is about, you know, down-regulating our own nervous systems. It is about taking care of our own bodies, but it's also this really radical act towards community care as well. It's a way that we kind of begin to disrupt and dismantle the ways that these systems of oppression are alive in our own bodies. So that's something we're kind of holding as part of the container of this space, is a way that we enact community care by intentionally inhabiting our bodies. And yoga is such a fantastic tool for doing that, because at its roots and in the core of its philosophy is that, you know, yoga is about freedom from suffering on an individual level and a collective level. It's a recognition that our liberation together is bound to each other's, and that no one of us is free until all of us are free. So yoga in that sense becomes an act of social justice. It becomes a way that we can embody justice. So it feels like a really good tool. These yoga spaces feel like a really appropriate space to be having these conversations and to be intentionally coming into our bodies to do this work in community. So I like to remind myself of that every time I teach, why we're holding this space, and every time that we come into the space together, because I think that it's the work that you can do a little bit and often that has the most impact. You know, we can go to like a weekend workshop or a training somewhere and get a download of diversity, equity, and inclusion information or something like that. But it's just this like one-time event, and it's when we're doing it consistently that we get, you know, like the power of habit, right? That's when we get the greatest change. So I'm hoping that we can like continue to remind each other of that as we come into these spaces. So as I was thinking about this today and the intention for the practice and the intention for this time together, I was reflecting on this article by Tema Okam called White Supremacy Culture, the Characteristics of White Supremacy Culture. I don't know if anyone has read that. It's kind of related to workspaces, but I think it bleeds into all of our daily lives. And it lists all these characteristics of white supremacy culture as they show up in workspaces. There are things like perfectionism and individualism. Maya's nodding her head. Are you familiar with that article? Yeah. And you know, the written word is a characteristic of white supremacy culture. And there's one right way to do things. And one of the main ones is a sense of urgency. And so this is one that's really sticking with me, the sense of urgency, because I feel that even outside of workspaces, that sense of urgency exists in the world and in our lives. And for me, that sense of urgency, all of these things, but sense of urgency in particular, has a very real, I have a very real bodily reaction to that. And maybe similar to some of the things you're feeling right now, Lindsay, as you prepare to start a new job, I feel immense anxiety when I am under that sense of urgency. And the way that shows up in my body is often like a shortness of breath, where I'm only breathing into the upper lobes of my lungs. When I have digestive upset, I have a lot of tension, especially in my neck and shoulders and belly, exhaustion. And then what I do, my body's immediate reaction, my brain's immediate reaction to that is to disconnect, because I couldn't live in that state and get the work done that I need to get done, right? I have to meet that deadline or whatever it is that's causing the sense of urgency. And that's the vicious cycle that's upheld by all of these systems, right? So I'm trying to think about ways that we learn to interrupt that cycle. How do we notice it and then interrupt it so that we can step out of it and actually rebel or resist against some of these characteristics of supremacy culture. So in my experience doing justice work and any kind of community organizing is that, like, while the injustices that we're trying to address need to be addressed immediately, they're an immediate concern, the work that we're able to do is so much more impactful when we can step out of that sense of urgency and step out of scarcity thinking, because it allows us to be more inclusive, and it allows us to get the right voices at the table. It allows us to slow down enough to take in information and process it and make choices that center community care over individual care. And so I bring this up in a yoga class because I think it's an opportunity that we have in this space to really explore what a liberatory pace feels like, as opposed to an urgency pace. Like, we can actually be in our bodies and we can practice, what does it feel like to move at the pace of my own breath? What does it feel like to move at the pace of a relaxed heartbeat? And then we have a reference point for when we're in our real lives. We're not in sort of the safety of a yoga space like this. We're in our real lives, and we can have a sort of bodily memory of what it feels like to be in alignment with our values, and to be able to recognize, oh, that's actually urgency coming up in me right now. I can take a minute and I can resist that. And I remember what it feels like to be aligned in my values, because I've been practicing that in community already. So I hope I'm making sense, but that's what I'm hoping that we can practice in this space, is coming into our bodies in a way that helps us realign with our values, and then having that reference point for when we're not on a yoga mat. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm hoping will flavor the practice tonight. And I, just like last week, I'm recognizing that a lot of the words that I'm saying have violence attached to them, that words like white supremacy and patriarchy and capitalism have very real violent impacts in the world, in history, and currently. And I have a bodily reaction when I say those words. And so I'm wondering if you are experiencing anything like that in your body, or what you might be experiencing in your body as you hear me say those words. So we're going to start this practice right now, where I'll ask you to just close your eyes if that's comfortable, or soften your gaze a little bit. And you can place your hand somewhere on your body that feels grounding to you, maybe on your legs or on your heart or your belly. And I'll invite you just to take a minute and notice whatever bodily sensations are arriving for you in this moment. And if you don't know what to look for, you could notice the temperature of your body, if you feel hot or cold, or if certain body parts feel hot or cold. You might notice the quality or the depth of your breath, or the pace of your heartbeat. You might notice if you have tension in your neck and shoulders or in your belly. And I'm just going to start naming some things that I'm seeing in the room. So I see a couple of people kind of rolling their shoulders. And I see a little bit of sort of rocking or adjusting to accommodate breath, swaying. And these little movements are ways that we can self-soothe, and they're part of that interruption process. So here we've noticed that there may have been heavy words or content. We are taking a moment to feel what that feels like, and we're leaning on self-soothing practices. Yeah. So that's one step towards embodiment. Okay, let's go ahead and start the practice. We can begin on our backs. And I think it will be helpful if we go ahead and place our blanket on the mat so that we'll have it for some padding a little bit later. And then you'll want to have blocks nearby so that you can access them while you're laying down. So as you're coming to lay on your back, I will invite you to bring your legs in whatever shape feels comfortable. So you might explore bringing the bottoms of your feet to the floor. I see someone in butterfly legs. That's nice too. So whatever feels like it's easiest on your spine right now. And for these first few moments of practice together, I'll invite you just to come into the experience of your breath. So just noticing how your body is moving to make space for your lungs to expand, how your body moves to assist the exhale. And then starting to come into your legs, I'll have you bring your attention down to your feet and just notice your feet. If you have socks on, you might notice the texture of the socks against your skin. If you don't have socks on, you may notice the temperature of the air on your feet or your ankles. And then notice your lower legs and your knees. Your thigh bones. And see if you can relax through your glutes and your outer hips. And then bringing your attention to your belly, you might notice that as you take a big breath in, your belly expands upward towards the ceiling. Similarly, you may notice that as you take a big breath in, your low back inflates a little bit against the floor. Notice the movement in your rib cage as you breathe. That there's sort of a floating motion upward and a fanning outward on your inhale. And then feel into your chest, into your heart space. See if you can imagine where your actual heart, the organ, is nestled between your lungs. So that each time you take a big inhale and the lungs fill with air, they're embracing your heart. And feel into your shoulder blades and how they press into the ground beneath you and how they support your heart space from underneath you. And then let your head be super heavy against the ground. So skull heavy, neck relaxed. And see if you can relax all the muscles of your face. You might notice you've been unintentionally furrowing your eyebrows. You might play with what it feels like to let the backs of your eyes widen a little bit. And then if and when it feels good for you to start moving, you can bring both of your knees in toward your chest. And here you can move in whatever way your body is being called to move. So if you want to find some rocking side to side, that might feel good. It may feel nice to let your knees come right over your hip points so that your low back can get contact with the ground. Right, and then from here, I'll invite you to stretch your feet up towards the ceiling. You don't have to straighten the legs all the way unless that feels good. But I will encourage you to draw your toes towards your face. So you're flexing your feet and press up through your heels. Stretching through the backs of your legs. And then here, it might feel good to kind of knead the air with your feet, like you're like a cat sort of kneading a blanket or a cushion. And just kind of articulating through your toes, flexing and pointing the feet, maybe rolling the ankles. Sometimes it feels good to point the feet really strongly so you can stretch through the tops of the feet and the shins. Okay. So